This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Oh, we say this a lot, but I cannot wait to get into today's episode because I know I am going to learn some things that I do not know right now.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun one and very technologically forward, right? Like
Very much so.
Cutting edge technology that we're going to learn about right now. What problem are we solving today?
What is extended reality and spatial computing?
What is extended reality and spatial computing? Wow, this is something I want to know the answer to. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Well, today we have the man to talk to. We have with us Alex Goldberg. He is a subject matter expert in spatial computing and extended reality technologies.
Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hi, so happy to be here. And what an amazing intro that was. I hope I can live up to that.
Well, we are going to have fun today because we're going to talk all about, like Jeff said, the future kind of is what you do, which is pretty cool. But I'd like to ask, when you were a kid, two things. One, did you always like computing? And two, did you have any idea any of this was going to happen in your lifetime?
Yes.
Ooh,
I did.
okay.
To both of those, yes, I absolutely did. So you asked if I was somebody into computers. I was very into computers and video games as a kid. I was probably obsessed with all of that stuff. There was video game consoles and also playing video games in arcades and on computers. There was a while that some of the best games were on computers, and there was also amazing consoles, so I played tons of games. In addition to that, when you asked, did I think that I would end up doing this? I forget how you referred to that a second ago, but something along those lines. I always fantasized about these technologies. We saw like what I do now is fueled by all the concepts that were introduced to me through video games and sci-fi books and movies. So, yes.
Okay.
That's
fantastic.
I
think you caught both of us off guard with a yes to both of those.
Yeah.
And I love that. Before we move into the future, I would like to, I know this may date you a little bit, but since you were so inspired by them, were there any specific games, whether it be a console, computer, whatever, that really got your imagination clicking on thinking about the future and what may be possible?
I remember, this isn't a game, but the first thing that comes to mind as an inspiration was Matthew Broderick's character in War Games.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Like hacking into, not necessarily like potentially invoking a nuclear war between us and the Soviet Union.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a good storytelling vehicle, but just his capability to, I suppose, be dangerous. It was a very cool concept.
Yes.
Right.
And I've been to Colorado Springs and I've been around NORAD, and that was the first thing that I thought of was War Games. I'm not the first person. I have friends in the military because I do work in aerospace, and there's a lot of overlap with that, obviously. And a lot of us were heavily influenced by that
movie.
Right.
There were so many games. It wasn't necessarily a specific game. It's more so the way that information is conveyed. So a user interface.
Okay.
And the way that you can interact with digital assets.
Right.
And then I feel like the training that I had and the way I was sort of indoctrinated into some of these concepts, those are the kinds of techniques that I like to utilize with the end user experiences that I create for the people that Now it's in aerospace, and those are frontline people assembling engines
Right.
or doing work in that field. And previously, I came from REI, the outdoor store, where I built
Right.
Right. Yeah.
AR footwear try-on. So you can point a mobile device at your foot, and you'd have a shoe tracking where your actual foot is, but it's a shoe that you might purchase. It
Oh,
doesn't
wow.
exist in real life. There's dozens of proof of
Very cool.
concepts, and some things like the virtual footwear try-on and augmented reality tent visualizations did go live, and a lot of those have a very kind of game-like feel to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so when I met you, I was down there for the Europa Clipper launch, and you were there for something else, but we started talking, and you said that you were a subject matter expert in XR and spatial computing. Can you explain to us what that is? Because I remember you told me, and I was like, that sounds amazing. I have no idea what that is.
It is amazing. I love that there are those, that's a career now. And
Yeah.
it's really exciting to be able to speak to young people through your podcast and talk about this, because I think that this is an exciting emerging technology, and it's a transformative emerging technology. So XR stands for extended realities. And
Okay.
it's a catch-all for augmented and virtual reality. You'll also sometimes hear mixed reality, which is like an in-between space.
Okay.
And
All
it
right.
gets a little confusing, but I'll try to simplify this. Augmented reality is when you are looking at the real world around you, and you have digital assets inserted into that real world.
Okay.
So like
Okay.
I was describing the virtual footwear try-on,
Right. All right.
and even though it's called a virtual footwear try-on, it's not for virtual reality, it's for augmented reality. So you're virtually looking at a shoe on your actual foot.
Right.
Okay.
So that's through a mobile device, and we did that at REI, and it went live. It was very successful, and you were able to hold a phone and point a mobile device at your foot, and
That's
instead
so
of your
cool.
it's super cool. And instead of seeing a sneaker, you see a shoe that you might purchase. Another
Okay.
great example of that is I built a climbing wall, rock climbing assistant, where if you held your phone or tablet up at the wall that you were about to climb, you would see different climbing routes on the actual wall.
Oh.
But I should say on the actual wall that appeared on the screen, because
Okay.
the actual wall doesn't have that. So
Right. Right.
the AR part of XR, the augmented reality part of that, you are inserting things into your actual world. Virtual reality. So
Right.
on the spectrum, you have AR at one end, which is the stuff I just described a second ago. And virtual reality is, instead of seeing the real world around you, you're now kind of transported to a totally immersive world.
Right.
So you are on a space station, and you can look down, and instead of seeing your actual foot and the way that your leg would look and the contours of all that moving in real time, you could now have like an alien leg, or you might not even have any leg. You look down at like, you could be in the air and you're like
Right.
on a magic carpet, or it could be anything. You're limited by your imagination. So that is virtual reality, and it's a totally immersive experience.
Yeah. Jeff, that reminds me of when you and I were at Lockheed Martin, remember, for Osiris-Rex, and we ran, air quotes, ran on Mars. Do you remember we had the...
Very much so.
Yeah, that was...
we got to have an experience.
Yes.
That was virtual reality. We had a full headset on.
Yeah.
And we had plastic pads on our shoes.
Yeah.
And we stepped into a plastic virtual reality disc with a bar around our waist.
Wow. Yes.
And we would hold on to the bar, but our feet would move on this disc.
Right.
So we would actually be walking on a virtual Mars.
Yeah.
And
it was
our
cool.
headset would show us where we were supposed to go, and we were supposed to get from the middle of Mars out in the middle of nowhere
really cool.
into the fort.
It was
cool.
it felt very real too.
So most people haven't done that. In fact, I've only
Yeah.
used machines that interpret my leg movement and then translate that into locomotion inside of a virtual experience. I've only actually used that a few times, a couple times with tech demos, like at business conferences.
Yeah.
Okay.
And other places where I've done full-blown simulations for some of the places that I've been fortunate enough to visit. So that's really cool. that you guys did
Yeah.
that. And there's a few different ways that we're experimenting with, as I described a second ago. We call that locomotion, so the way you're going to move in a virtual environment.
Right.
And 360 treadmills, so you are on one of those.
Right.
And there's other techniques where you have rollers on your shoes and you're kind of holding onto a guardrail or a bar.
Yep.
So you're holding yourself in place, and it's now detecting through the wheels that are rolling on these kind of roller skate type of an apparatus that's attached to your foot. And it's then translating the force that you're applying and the way that those wheels are moving to then move you in that virtual space.
Right.
There's kind of two ways to do that. And, that's a great jumping off point for a neat aspect with this, is that we're figuring all of this out. It isn't really day one, since this technology is actually, a lot of these things have been around since the 60s and 70s, just in R&D labs.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, for it to become commercially available, we're still figuring a lot of it out.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
That is A, it's super cool.
Yeah.
And B, I have to tell you, now that you think what we got to do is super cool, I now think it's 10 times as cool as when I first did it.
Me too.
So that was an excellent explanation of the spectrum from AR to VR. Could you also let us in on what is spatial computing?
Yeah.
Spatial computing is the overarching, I suppose, kind of genre or sector that these kinds of technologies live in. I think sector is probably a better word than genre, but anyway, I feel like those two words can be used interchangeably. You could say XR and spatial computing for the most part interchangeably, but spatial computing is augmented and virtual reality, as well as things like projection mapping and 3D scanning, where first you would capture a place using a scanner, and then you could import that data into this now immersive environment where you're going to have your VR. So let's say, for instance, I scanned the living room where I'm being interviewed right now, and I have my desk in front of me. I know it's just an audio podcast, but I'm sitting in a chair. There's some windows next to me, and there's a desk. I could scan this space, and then I could import all of that into a virtual environment. So the ability to do a 3D capture, that is part of spatial computing. And what you would do with that data is part of spatial computing. Then some of the endpoints can be in various XR experiences. I also mentioned projection mapping. And that's a very interesting concept where, using my living room again as an example, if I wanted my desk to look like a fish tank with fish swimming in it, I could have projectors projecting something that looks like a koi pond right here on my desk, but it could be interactive. So if I had the projector projecting stuff, and then something that was also looking at my gestures, it could see me touching the desk, and every time I touch the surface, a ripple can now appear in the koi pond. And even I could dangle food, and these virtual fish could now come and want to take a bite of that food item. And giving that some utility, there are companies like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed that have actively used, and I believe Boeing as well, have used projection mapping. So somebody who's building like a wing of an airplane, while they're working on that, they could have a projection of where all the bolts are, so they know where to go to next. And it's actually looking at the user and updating the information as presenting in real time. So you could do totally fun stuff like that koi pond. You could also apply utility with it. So all of these things, you could have interactive fun experiences, or you could sell somebody footwear, or you can instruct somebody. If I scanned a section of a shop floor, somebody could remote in and look at that virtually and make sure it had proper ergonomic things in place, or safety factors for distances between objects that could be dangerous. So there's a lot of utility. There's so much fun stuff, but tons of practical utility as well.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I'm guessing that AR is probably more useful in kind of what you do, and like in stores like REI and stuff like that, than say virtual reality, where you're not buying boots that you're going to wear on Mars, right?
So so personally, I'm I only have so much time to focus on certain things and provide value. And I personally gravitate to AR.
Okay.
I love interacting with the real world and certain things in it that can help people learn faster and also achieve. So in aerospace companies, we have a thing called getting to rate. So where we use traditional methods to manufacture the items that we might be working on. That is called manufacturing rate. So we want to use technology to help people perform faster so we can achieve more in those industries.
Right.
But you also mentioned the kind of shoe you'd wear on Mars. So there's a whole industry out there selling what we call skins, which are packages of the way that a character or your avatar, your virtual avatar could look. So there's now designers, like fashion designers, that have traditionally done actual clothing that humans would wear. They're now designing just for virtual avatars for like games like Fortnite, for instance.
So you could be all spiffy and wearing really amazing. Oh my gosh!
Right. So if Paramount was releasing a movie, and I don't know if they own the IP for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but just using that as an example, in concert with promoting the release of the film, they could also do a marketing event in Fortnite where you could then buy your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle outfit to wear in Fortnite. So we're starting to see this convergence
of all
these different kinds of endpoints, whether it's AR, VR. Yeah.
So when we first started and we used the terms XR and spatial computing, I definitely think those words have not hit the mainstream enough, because all of the examples that we've all been talking about, but especially you, Alex, I think that a lot of our listeners will have experienced at least some part of this, even if it's not one of the specific ones that they can relate to. So as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader in doing this, what are some of the things that you do on a daily or a weekly basis in terms of helping companies use this technology moving forward?
I want to answer that, but I also want to point some of your audience to examples they probably already know about. So have you seen Ready Player One, which was an amazing book by Ernest Cline that was a pretty decent movie. Sometimes the movie gets a little bit of a bad rap, but I actually think if the movie just came out without the book, it'd be a really cool movie. I mean, how often does a movie live up to a book? I can't think of any example.
I agree.
Actually. Okay. It's good to hear that, Jeff, because most people just bag on the film. I thought the film was really the special effects were amazing in it. So he's in a virtual world, and the Oasis was the name of the virtual world, and it's a play on a concept called the metaverse, where people could jump into a virtual world and you could hang out, you could do everything.
Right.
No matter where you are in the world, you could jump into this metaverse. So I think Ready Player One is a great example of virtual reality. There's also movies when I was a kid. There was one called Lawnmower Man, which is kind of a mediocre film. There's also Johnny Mnemonic, which was not a good movie at all. I'll say that. I hope no one comes after me for that. It was a Keanu Reeves film. Ice-T.
Also fair.
Those are great examples of virtual reality. And I think a really good example of augmented reality, which a lot of people might know of through Pokemon. There's a game called Pokemon Go from a software developer, Niantic.
Right.
And you are looking for AR Pokemon characters.
Mm-hmm.
So you hold up your mobile device and you find these locations where they spawn, and you have to go there and capture them. That is a very popular AR concept. Also, Snapchat has lenses where you're able to hold the mobile device up and look at your friend, but all of a sudden your friend's crying, even though they're not. Or they have a fan face, or they have like a wild hat on. Again, in the real world, they don't, but when you look through your lens, they do. So these are all examples of AR and VR. And I think you asked me, Jeff, what do I do and what are ways as a subject matter expert that I use those?
Mm-hmm.
In whatever aspect of your work you would like to share.
So I meet with people that are building very complex things. And I gather requirements from them We call that requirement gathering. That's the first step to build my experience. I want to find out what recs, short for requirements, they need. So they're going to need to see a bolt. With this bolt, are they going to need to see the value of how much you're going to tighten it?
Right.
And the order that you are going to tighten these things. These are important things.
Okay.
That I'm now going to then communicate. Another great way that this stuff is being leveraged by me regularly and other people like me across manufacturing, across different sectors of manufacturing, is collaboration. So this is where VR and AR both really shine. So you can remotely join a meeting and you could be looking at an asset together that is being developed. So if this asset doesn't exist, it's just a virtual asset, and it might just exist in CAD, which is it's a 3D model that is referenced for design purposes.
Yeah.
I want to say it's computer automated drafting. That's what that stands for. Anyway, you could look at this early model that is what we call as design, and you can virtually collaborate and point things out. And now some of the VR headsets, they notice where your eyes are looking. And they can also notice your facial expression. So the character that's representing you in these spaces can smile or have like an facial expression, and you could convey these the way that you emote. And then your avatar is in this counterpart of you that is now in this virtual world is doing that as well. And when you look at somebody, you can tell in the virtual space that they are looking at you. And some of our social cues that we have in real life are transcending to your virtual reality counterpart. And this was very big in COVID. So a lot of virtual communication, collaboration tools, a lot of these were already in the works, but they got throttled into high gear to have people remotely work together. For doing those, for collaborating in augmented reality, we can also do that where I could have an AR headset on and I could look at something, but then somebody remotely could be on their desktop using Teams, for instance. In fact, this exists. Microsoft has a product called Remote Assist that runs on a device called the HoloLens. So somebody could have the HoloLens on, and now the video camera on the HoloLens is sharing that to X amount of people on a Teams call. The recipients that are now watching what that person is looking at, they could drop items into that person's mixed reality. They could drop 3D assets like instructional arrows, and 2D images and full motion videos that are now going to be floating in front of me. If I had the HoloLens on them, broadcasting to somebody else remotely, they could look at what I'm seeing and start modifying what we call my world space. So you do that in virtual reality and augmented reality. So these are some popular ways to use that technology. I think there's a really cool example as well for AR that I'd like to mention. My friend Julia, she has a company called NovaBee, and she's really big on a concept called placemaking. She's made virtual places that exist in AR, where there was a jazz club in San Francisco that was around like back in the olden days, I think like in the 30s and 40s. And you can go to where that was in that neighborhood. It's a Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco. It's kind of a sketchy neighborhood, so be careful. Doing your AR thing there now. But back in the day, it was a totally happening place. And from somebody that used to live in San Francisco, I hope they could clean that up and make it a happening place again. But you can go there now and you can hold up your mobile device and it could see an image marker, and it recognizes the image marker will tell your mobile device to go to a website, and then it'll build the scene so you can look at the way that this jazz club looked on that intersection. You could see that now in 2024.
Wow.
Or 2025, this comes out in more than a few weeks. Whenever somebody's listening to this, they could go to that spot and then look at something. And this is a popular concept called placemaking with AR, and I think it is really cool.
It is very cool. Plus, I think if you do a lot of stuff like this also saves history, which is kind of nice too, so that people can go back and take a look at it.
100%. 100%. And with AI, you can start using prompts, and with Gen AI, reconstruct things with a 3D model output. it's becoming easier and easier to create these kinds of concepts where Julia had to put together a design team to build this and manually create a lot of this. Now with AI, we're able to enable youngsters like some of your listeners to go and quickly execute these kinds of experiences.
Well, so that's cool. That kind of goes into my next question, which is these things are all so amazing, but like, what would you say to a kid these days who, I don't know, sixth grade, eighth grade, whatever, if they're interested in getting into this? Do you have any, words of wisdom or telling, what you think might happen in their lifetime? Because who knows?
So I'm the mentor for a company that my good friend Alan and his wife Julia founded called Unlimited Awesome. And one of the things that we're trying to do is instead of training you to become a good employee at a company, we want to turn you into an innovator and an entrepreneur and really have a mindset shift in that direction. And we really want people to think instead of what job am I going to have,
Right.
We want them to think, what problem do they want to solve?
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to quickly execute and come up with solutions. You're really only limited by your imagination and your grasp of the scope of problems that you might be aware of that you could then try to solve per se. So I would tell the people listening to this, think about the problems that you want to solve and the way that you could use tools like the types that I described during this podcast to solve them. When I first started with this technology around 2015, it was hard to build the things that I first built. Now we're at a great point where there's solutions specifically designed to build this.
Right.
And now even with AI, you could just in plain language use a prompt to get AI to build these things. So we're in an amazing time where it's significantly easier to execute, and it's going to get even easier to build these kinds of things.
Well, this has been so interesting, and I've learned so much in this, but we are at the point in our show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. So I'm curious what your challenge is going to be, Alex.
Sure. So my challenge is think of something that you want to build in AR. There's a number of ways to then build an AR solution, but I urge you to think something simple, like maybe a work instruction or a tip, something that you would like to see appear when you walk into a room that can help make something more accessible, or walking through the forest, maybe a plant identifier or something that that would look at an item and identifies that object, things like that. So I want to inspire you to start thinking about a way that a spatial computing solution could be something that you would personally enjoy. So I'm constantly thinking about that. I want to urge your audience to think about that because we are well along the way of enabling them to execute and build those solutions.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I might have to come up with some of that stuff myself to make things easier when I'm writing or researching my books and stuff like that. Yeah.
And there's tons of tutorials on the web. So you can look up how to build something. If they're maybe very young and perhaps intimidated, you might need to work with a parent.
Right.
And there's a development kit called Unity. It's a game development framework. And there's this guy, Dilmer, Dilmer. He has tons of tutorials out there. And there's different learning portals like LinkedIn Learning and Udemy, where you can go and learn how to build this stuff, where brilliant people have simplified the process to develop XR solutions. So I urge you to think of these things because I want to inspire future creators.
Yeah.
But if you're so inspired to actually execute and build them, most of the things that you could think of, you could actually execute. It just take a little bit of work to do.
That's great. So I will get these links. You mentioned all of the different things. So we'll put all this on our website so everyone can go and kind of take a look at it. But yeah, I'm going to go and kind of dig into. Computing intimidates me a little bit, but I think it's so fun to learn about it. And it's such an amazing technology.
I definitely have neurons firing
Yeah.
for the AR, VR solutions.
Yeah.
I think my brain is shifting more towards AR like yours.
Yeah.
I like the idea of, holding up the phone and you can see part of reality, but also whatever it is, the solution or the thing you would want to do. This is exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
And,
Oh my
and
gosh.
the Oculus Quest, or the Meta Quest, as it's been rebranded as now, that has what we call pass-through mixed reality. So you're in a virtual reality headset at a relatively low price point. It's around $200 for the Quest 3, and it has cameras facing outwards, so you can see the real world around you, even though you're on a virtual reality immersive headset.
Wow.
And it's a great place. Christmas time's coming up, or if you have a birthday coming soon, parents, these are great ways to inspire your youngsters. And iOS and Android also, those mobile devices have their own AR applications as well.
Very cool. Oh my
Very
gosh.
cool.
Yeah, there's so much to learn. Well, this has been so informative and also lots of fun. So thank you so much for being on Solve It for Kids, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
I was right. I definitely learned a lot since the introduction of this episode.
Me too.
My goodness, this is right on the cutting edge, and I am excited to learn a lot more about spatial computing and XR.
Yeah, when I first met Alex and we got into this conversation, I thought I knew what XR was. I had no idea. And so I think he did a really fabulous job of explaining the difference between AR, alternate reality, and extended reality, and all of these different things that we have that people use these days. And it's really interesting and cool, don't you think?
Oh, very much so. And I love how he separated and defined them out for us.
Yeah.
So that when you hear about what somebody is using or doing out there in the world, you can now put it into the correct category of which reality we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then this challenge, of course, he wanted us to think. So think about a spatial computing solution that could solve a problem in your life that you would like solved.
Yeah, I think this could be something as simple as moving something across the room without touching it. This could be how would you build something in a manufacturing plant. I mean, there's so many different things you can do with this that this is really cool.
Yes.
So if you come up with something really fun and you want to share it with us, and we will share it with Alex, tag us on our social media. We are at Kids Solve at Facebook and Instagram, and look for us on Blue Sky soon. And also, don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we'll have this episode and all the other episodes. You can learn more about all of our guests. And don't forget, we have book lists at the bottom. So if you want to go to the library and check out some books to learn more, you can.
And don't forget Jennifer Swanson as an author of a whole lot of those books you're going to find, because they are super cool ones.
Thank you.
You are definitely going to be wanting to learn more about XR and spatial computing. We are just dipping our toe into what this new technology is going to do, just as Alex was describing to us today. Until next time, I think Jen and Jeff are going to be learning more about the exact same stuff you are. So until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on
Solve It for Kids.